Today is Thursday, August 29, 2013. We will be talking to you about Apple's upcoming September 10th event, more wild iPhone color rumors, the positives and negatives of in-app purchase, and a lot more. This is the iMore Show. Joining me, as always, the managing editor of iMore and the executive editor of The Loop Insight, and well-known Twitter bon vivant, Mr. Peter Cohen. How are you, Peter?
Good, Rene. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. We are also joined from roughly 5 hours in the future, the senior editor of iMore, Mr. Richard Devine. How are you, Richard?
I'm very well, Rene.
Now, I have to make two announcements because today is a very special day indeed. Not only is it Judgment Day, according to Terminator 2 Mythos, but it is the birthday of senior iMore editor Georgia. I cannot prove that she is, in fact, Skynet and will bring about justice Judgment Day, but I think the linking of those two events cannot be denied.
I also feel it necessary to point out that today is not the day that Marty McFly goes to in the future.
That's another day in the future?
Yes, indeed. It seems like every day is that day, according to pranksters on the interwebs.
Nice. The interwebs. Where do I begin to rage? Well, let's start off with some happy news. I don't know if it's happy news or not. There was a rumor prompted by some sloppy reporting in Bloomberg. Bloomberg said en passant that the iPads would be included in the September 10th event. I didn't hear anything about that. I don't think anybody actually heard anything about that. I don't think anybody actually previously reported that. Apple does have four legs in their product line. They have iPhones, iPads, iPods, and Macs. Last year they mixed and matched iPhones and iPods and then iPads and Macs, with September being the first two and October being the last two. And it made sense they do the same thing this year for similar reasons. But Bloomberg is a major outlet, so we picked it up. A lot of people picked it up. And then, Peter, your partner in crime at The Loop decided to give an epic nope.
Yeah, good old Jim Dalrymple can always be counted on to prove or disprove these rumors with a single word, and he did not let us down this time. The interesting thing for me is that Bloomberg's, I guess it's Bloomberg's Tokyo desk was the one that came out with this particular rumor du jour. And what was fascinating to me is that less than a day earlier, Bloomberg's West Coast desk said that there weren't going to be iPads at this event. So the left hand literally did not know what the right hand was doing.
I mean, you and I have bitched and complained about and raged about the state of mainstream journalism, and anyone who's picked up a paper, actually, no, you won't find this in the paper because they're busy laying off all their staff, their photographers, their reporters, their writers, everybody. They used to, I don't want to say they, there were some people in traditional journalism who mocked blogs and bloggers and technology writers as not being legitimate, reliable, or trustworthy sources for information. And yet the sorry state of reporting today seems to be coming from, and especially, I don't know why, the Asian desks of institutions like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Bloomberg, who we expect to be able to trust more.
Yeah, exactly, and that's because especially in the traditional publishing markets, they've had to cut back so heavily, not just on reporting, but also on everything that goes around with it, like copy editing, fact checking. It just doesn't happen like it used to, and the rush to get something published right away is as compelling and overwhelming for a big news organization like Bloomberg as it is for an iMore or a Loop. So it's unfortunately it's the way that things are, and it's not the way that things should be.
I was watching The West Wing. I've been rewatching The West Wing probably for the 20th time this week, and I was just watching C.J. Craig, the press secretary, deal with reporters trying to figure out which newspaper had a leak and whether it'd be 1 day or 2 days before it appeared in the paper. And Richard, that made sense back then, 10 or 15 years ago, however long it was. But today that blows my mind. That'd be up on the Drudge Report or TMZ or any of a number of sites instantaneously.
It's definitely just a sign of the times that we live in. I mean, I know over here in the UK, especially things like the tabloid press have a particularly bad reputation for sensationalist stories, and it does seem to be that we're kind of moving away from that those traditional media sources, and we're looking towards the tech sites, the Twitter feeds, the Jim Dalrymples, and it's not that we shouldn't, but it is a very, very, very different world. And I mean, you touched upon the Bloomberg thing. We picked that up because it was Bloomberg, because it's a recognized news agency. If that had been just some random Japanese Apple blog, we wouldn't have
German,
touched it.
American, whatever Apple blog.
Anyway, we wouldn't have touched it. Because Bloomberg is a recognized news organization, we, like everybody else, picked it up. But it was almost too. You could almost smell it a mile off. With it was just so casually thrown into an article about something else. But like Peter said earlier, it's the left hand and the right hand don't seem to know what the other one's doing.
The fascinating thing for me is that you're absolutely right, Richard. If this had happened differently, we specifically would not have touched the story. We at iMore wouldn't have touched the story, but many others would have as well. But it's fascinating to me that there exists this blind spot in tech reporting, both among mainstream media and among certain members of the tech press who shall remain nameless, where if the leak comes, or if the news comes from the Mystic Orient, then it can be reported with impunity. You know, and they're sources that we should know better by now that are full of crap, like DigiTimes, for example, which I've never actually done myself a sort of a look at what their accuracy rate is, but I can't imagine that their accuracy rate is better than 50%. Oh,
We looked, and Mark Gurman and I looked into this too. And the thing with DigiTimes, and what makes it so perplexing, is they have incredibly good information, but absolutely no idea what to do with it. So it's like panels will be bought, and they'll just say new iPad panel, but it doesn't mean Apple bought them. It doesn't mean they're using it for this product. So they do get accurate reports from the supply chain, but as Tim Cook said in one of his conference calls, it's one point of data, and I think the value in reporting now is not necessarily reporting, this many panels were sold, but actually doing the analysis and providing the context. And I got on a discussion with Eric Silka of Mac Rumors, because some people were saying, these stories shouldn't be repeated. And I think it varies by outlet. Like, for example, I think Mac Rumors, the name says rumors on the site, and what they do is they catalog every rumor, and then they report on the reliability of that source in the past, and then weigh in on whether they think it's accurate or not. And for a lot of people who just see rumors and don't know whether to believe them or not, that can be a useful service. We chose not to report on any of those crazy iOS, beta release dates that proved to be not true, and we chose not to report on that nuance letter that said that the gold master for iOS 7 would, sorry, not the gold master, the general availability, the final release would be on the day of the iPhone event, because that's never happened. And if you understand how development cycles work, you can't go GA until you've gone GM, and they haven't gone GM yet. But a lot of sites picked it up, and I think when you're not dealing with the Mac rumors, there are also some people who believe they should report every rumor because it generates attention, and it has the lucky bonus of having a second story to say, oh no, it was wrong, and they don't have to deal. It's not their name on the rumor, so they don't have accountability, but they get all the traffic from it.
It's a never-ending source of disappointment to me. But I guess it's the nature of it, because one way or the other, the rumor drives traffic to the site, and that ultimately, whether you're a Bloomberg or a Washington Post or a New York Times or an iMore, is the coin of the realm. We all live and die by our page views. Yeah. It's just a question of how we want to get them. And whether we can live with ourselves at night afterwards.
Or others.
Right.
Speaking of which, I'm going to skip ahead and do the other one later. There was another parts leak, and we got it about a week ago. Last week we talked a lot about the gold iPhone, and I'd heard quite a bit about why this made sense for Apple. But Ali Kazmuha, who is an absolute ninja when it comes to dealing with iOS, iPhone parts and repairs and stuff like that, got her hands on some pictures of sort of a steel-colored iPhone. Some people called it graphite, some people called it gray, but to keep the metal motif going, it was a steel-covered iPhone, and it was buttons to it. And then Sonny Dixon got his hands on backplates that were also steel, and it's not sort of slate, it's sort of a more steel color, and we didn't report it because we couldn't get the backplates, we couldn't get more than one source, but this week, there's not enough of these to suggest that Apple is by any means going into widespread distribution, but it looks like they at least tested another color. Ali was wondering if because black is so hard to anodize and chips so easily that maybe they were going to do gray instead of black because it was a more resilient color. I have only heard about gold, black, and silver, but Richard, I'm wondering, what do you think about them sort of maybe doing multiple colors, but keeping metal as a sort of premium look for the 5S?
I think I think it'd be a good move if they pulled it off. I mean, we're pretty convinced at this point. Obviously, the gold iPhone's a thing, and it exists. So it's not far-fetched at all to think that they would toy around, even just toying around with prototypes of different finishes. If you kind of look at them all side by side, though, going from the white and silver down to the black and slate, the 4 would be there'd be a very complete mix in that kind of metal, in those kind of metal finishes. You've going from the light silver down into the graphite. You've got the gold, and it almost looks. I saw those pictures and it kind of looked right to me, because the gold on its own, while different, it kind of stands out a little bit. It is very, very different, but the kind of the graphite just seemed to tie them all together. And I don't know, maybe it's real, maybe it's not, but it would be a particularly sort of nice looking line if it was.
Peter, would you hate on steel as much as you hated on gold?
No, actually, I really like the graphite stuff that we've seen. I would be very compelled to get a graphite iPhone. I think that's a very handsome look.
He's unpredictable.
I'm still going to get a gold one just for Peter's sake.
I'm getting gold too.
Gold wouldn't be so bad if I could get it studded with rhinestones and spell out pimp on the back of it or something.
It's a rhinestone iPhone.
Something to go with my, pimp cane and my pimp hat and my big fur coat.
Pimp hand being way strong.
That's right.
I just had a sudden Kramer flash. I'm not a pimp, Jerry. So less rumor and more rumor realized. We've been hearing for a while that the Apple TV would be getting new channels. There was a rumor that CW would be coming to it that never panned out. And then there were additional rumors, and now it looks like several of those channels are live. All I got in Canada was Vivo. I turned it on, I started playing the Gaga video, and then it wouldn't stop. I had to reboot my Apple TV to get out of it. Apparently, the Gaga was a go-go all over my Apple TV and made it a no-go. I don't know.
Whoa.
But the other channels that came on for Americans like Peter, I think, were the Disney channels and the Weather Channel.
Yes, indeed. It's interesting to see Apple kind of fill out the programming on the Apple TV a little bit more. A lot of people are saying, come on, Apple, just get it over with and release an app store for the Apple TV. That's not going to happen, folks. That's not going to happen. The Apple TV has a lot more limited resources than your iPhone or your iPad do. It doesn't have the same amount of storage capacity. Apple has to be very judicious about what they let in and don't let in on the Apple TV. But I guess it's a possibility farther in the future when new revisions to the hardware come out. But regardless, it's interesting to see Apple continue this effort that we've got where, people can get new programming, but a lot of it remains premium programming, if you will, some additional fee that you have to pay or, be in cahoots with a cable company in order to receive.
Yeah, how does that work? Do you have to log in with your cable box or something in order to watch the channel that you want in the Apple TV rather than on the cable box?
That's exactly right. There's an authentication system very similar to how these apps work on other iOS devices like the iPad or the iPhone, where you actually have to log in and all they're doing is just authenticating that, yes, you are indeed a subscriber to this cable system, and yes, you do indeed have this package as part of your plan, and then the gates open and you can watch the programming. Works the same way with like HBO Go.
It's so convoluted, and there's. I love the Apple TV so much. I use it constantly. I cut my cable cord. 90% of my TV viewing is on an Apple, quite close to 100% now, because I don't even. I got rid of my PlayStation, waiting on getting the new one. So pretty much all I watch now is Apple TV, and it's fantastic. But it's got these little things like. There's been rumors of an SDK for a long time. I've heard them. MG Siegler's heard them. Clayton Morris has heard them. I'm sure others have as well. And developers have been spoken to about it, but nothing has come of it. It seems like Apple is happy to pursue this partner channel strategy where they sign a deal and push out an icon to the Apple TV for that specific channel partner. But it makes it hard. For non-traditional entrants to get in there. It limits it to certain kinds of programming. It does involve these convoluted things. And I was raging yesterday. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Star Trek Into Darkness, if you buy the DVD or the Blu-ray, chances are you get no bonus features. And I like bonus features more than I like the movie, and oftentimes, especially with the latest Star Trek movie. Luckily, the iTunes version came with iTunes extras, so I bought that for it. It was also out early, so I bought that. But the Apple TV still, 3 years later, the original Apple TV, the OS X Tiger-based one, had iTunes Extra support. Apple introduced the new Apple TV. It lost iTunes Extra support, and 3 years on, they have not restored it yet, which meant I had to go to my Mac and download 5-point-something gigabytes because the Mac and iOS devices can't stream Apple movies or TV shows yet. Only the Apple TV can do that. And then to put the crap cherry on top of my crap sundae, it wasn't even J.J. Abrams doing the commentary. So I was a little fed up with that, but it seems like, and Richard, maybe you could speak to this a little bit, the Apple TV is so close, but so far.
It is. I think I wrote a post a couple of months ago before WWDC, kind of almost pleading for more regionalized content because, obviously, like yourself, I'm not in the United States, so I'm kind of a little bit out on a limb when it comes to getting new stuff. It's almost there, especially when you consider some of the content that is already there and some of the things that have sort of AirPlay built in. It seems almost too much of a no-brainer for me that they would approach in big markets like Canada, the UK, mainland Europe. They would approach big TV content providers like the BBC over here, Sky TV, and say, look, here's the Apple TV. Here's what we want you to do. Put your stuff on it, and it would make it almost impossible not to use every single day. I mean, at the minute, I kind of use it exclusively as a Netflix and an MLB TV box, which is fine. I'm more than happy to do that, but it's just that little bit, the tiny little bit extra that we're all wanting is stuff that we don't have to have a cable subscription for, or that we've already paid for elsewhere. It's frustrating, especially when you can AirPlay stuff from your iPhone. But I don't know. I kind of hope that for the future, we're going in the right direction. I just hope that it keeps going and we get to where we ultimately everybody hopes we're going to be.
The thing that blew my mind, specifically on this, Peter, was Paramount has always been user hostile. I remember the last Star Trek movie, I bought the Blu-ray and I couldn't skip the movie trailers. And now 4 years later, I don't even remember the movies those trailers were for, and I still can't skip them. And now they made all these deals with certain outlets. For example, only Target gets the disc with the director's commentary, and only Walmart gets this, and only iTunes gets that. Completely consumer hostile. And the minute people started complaining about it on Twitter, all the replies are, oh, I'll just torrent it. So at the same time, you have companies like Apple trying to make it easy and inexpensive enough that people don't have to turn to piracy. You have these complete assholes on the media side who just don't understand that consumer satisfaction is something that they need to achieve in their business. Absolutely.
This was the source of an epic rant from Kevin Spacey, the actor, producer, man about town, who starred and also executive produced the Netflix series House of Cards. He recently ranted about how clueless media executives are when it comes to this sort of stuff, and it's like, you want people to buy your stuff, make it available to them. Mm-hmm. Wake the F up, people. And you know, a lot of people, you know, watching this, and it's been recirculated a dozen times, or you know, a dozen million times, since it first went online, are nodding their heads, going, "Yeah, you know, preach it, brother. This is exactly what the Hollywood executives need to hear. You know, you just make it easy for us to buy your shit, and we
Let me
will."
give you money.
Yeah. Exactly. Shut up and take my money!
You know, I wish he would do it, and I wish that Spacey would do that rant as Christopher Walken. I want him to walk in there and go, Paramount, you're crazy like that. My content stranded. Apple TV. Why? I think, you know, maybe that would get through to them.
You know, as somebody who, you know, enormously enjoyed House of Cards, I was ready to pull the trigger on my Netflix subscription before they started doing original programming. You know, Netflix would update with some stuff that I wanted to see now and again, and sure, they've got some obscure niches. You know, I can get my weird Finnish zombie movies from Netflix when I want to.
A lot of anime, a lot of kid stuff.
Right, exactly. You know, a lot of offbeat stuff that you don't find from your local Redbox, for example. I was ready to pull the trigger, but you know, now that they're doing original programming, I've kept it, and I'm very happy that I've kept it because they've had a string of amazing series come out. I mean, you know, they did the new season of Arrested Development. They've got some other new stuff coming out.
Orange is the New Black.
Orange is the New Black is all anybody is talking about everywhere when it comes to new series. So, you know, the Netflix has proven that you can do this and make money and get interest from people and win or at least be nominated for awards. You know, so I mean, if these things are important to Hollywood executives, and I think that they are, they should really wake up and smell the cat food.
So let me ask you this, because Alex Lindsay on MacBreak Weekly keeps saying that Apple should start doing what Netflix did. You know, Apple did partner, I don't know if they partnered, but they did have Dr. Horrible from Joss Whedon on, which was a non-network property, and it did extremely well. Do you think this is something that Apple should go near? I mean, I always get nervous because Apple is so focused. They know what their core competencies are. The problems they do have is when they stray from their core competencies, but they have a legacy relationship with Disney, and they produce all the parts of the pipe that's needed to actually create this content. Is there a world that you can see where Apple is actually providing direct iTunes programming the way Netflix is?
I would love to see it. I mean, I would love to see Apple really kind of muscle its way into the content creation market in the same way that you see, well, for example, video game developers or video game console manufacturers do. You know, it's not unusual at all in the video game market to see companies like Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo own studios that produce software specifically, exclusively for their platforms. You know, I mean, what would Nintendo be without first-party products?
Mario,
like,
yeah, Donkey Kong,
Exactly,
Zelda.
exactly,
Pokemon.
exactly. I mean, you know, Microsoft acquired Bungie and made Halo. You know, Halo and Xbox are inseparable, as much as old-school Mac gamers would like to think otherwise. You know, likewise, Sony. I mean, Sony started out with 989 Studios. They went on a big acquisition binge straight through the 90s and aughts.
I bought PS2 for God of War.
Exactly right. Yeah, Killzone from Guerrilla Games. You know, they acquired Guerrilla Games. Naughty Dog, you know, which made Crash Bandicoot. Naughty Dog came out with The Last of Us, which is you know, a zombie game that is all anybody talks about or has been talking about.
Didn't Nintendo buy Rare back in the day so they could have all those great? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you see this cycle repeated over and over again, and actually it's going to be the subject of an upcoming editorial rant by yours truly. But
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. But I would love to see Apple get into the content creation market and produce programming, maybe take some music artists under their wings, or do some smart acquisitions. You know, use those billions to acquire some companies that are doing great stuff, maybe smaller labels, smaller production companies that are doing this sort of stuff, and foster that development. I mean, why wouldn't they want a piece of that pie?
Yeah, that seems to be the cherry. They could sniper this, Richard. There could be a world where they have exclusive entertainment content, maybe games, the way Peter said. They could have their own division of that. Some people in the chat room, Frederick Jones was saying English Premier League, and a lot of people in America would love to see Sunday Ticket on the Apple TV.
I would love to see more English Premier League football just anywhere. So I'd be more than happy for something like that.
Yeah, so I wonder what opportunity. I mean, Peter, you mentioned Apple buying companies, and they bought 4 more. Apple buys companies all the time. I think Tim Cook said they bought like 30 or something over the last year, and the latest ones, make sure I get the names right, they bought Hopstop, which was a transit application. They also bought Embark, another transit application. Those are 2 things that are interesting because when Apple took over control of their own mapping application, they no longer started, when they stopped using Google data and tried to roll their own, one of the biggest absences was transit. They no longer provided bus, train, metro, subway, those kinds of directions, but now they've bought 2 companies that do just that. But they also bought Passif, and they bought AlgoTrim, and AlgoTrim sounds like, and I forget, there was another name. What was the company that did the search and discovery for media? I forget that name now, but AlgoTrim looks like it makes it more efficient. Peter, I think you wrote about this. It makes it more efficient to store and transport large amounts of data.
Yeah, Algotrim is a Swedish developer of codecs. That is to say, stuff that makes video and graphics compressed down. And their particular area of specialty is getting code as thoroughly optimized and compressible on RISC processors, like the ARM processor that's inside the iPhone and the iPad, as possible. So this is a real smart acquisition for Apple, because the more efficient Apple makes it to move data around on these devices, the faster that these devices will operate without creating problems like generating lots of heat, or wasting a lot of battery, or using a huge amount of bandwidth over a data connection. All these things, improving efficiency, improving performance are what Apple wants to do, because let's face it, the mobile market is very different from the PC market of, let's say, 7 or 8 years ago. It's not about spec. No one cares how many cores your phone has, or your tablet has, as much as NVIDIA would like to make it to the contrary. They're interested in what you can actually do with it, and something like Algotrim makes it possible to do more things more easily with an iPhone. So, very smart acquisition on Apple's part.
Maybe you want to go, well, you've got 8 cores. Good for you.
Exactly.
More cores.
But I think you're right. When Brian Klug
my cores
was on Vector a couple weeks ago, he was explaining why LTE is much better on battery life than 3G was. And that's counterintuitive to some people, because they expect new technologies to be more battery hungry, and there were terrible LTE implementations on early devices, which is why Apple skipped them. But when you have an LTE implementation like Apple's, it turns on the connection, gets the data, and turns it off so much faster and more efficiently that by being on LTE all the time, you save much more battery life than you would on 3G. And the same thing applies to moving around data. If you can move data in a compressed, lightweight form, then the radio has to be on less often. And when the radio's on less often, or when you're not spending time with a screen lit up just waiting for stuff more often, you start getting these huge battery efficiencies that might sound trivial, like part of a second here, part of a second there, but add up to tremendous amounts of time. And when you blend that in with magic things like Haswell, or what we're hearing about, more efficient A7 processors, and suddenly you get those 12 hours of battery life on a MacBook Air, or you get a device as thin as the iPhone 5 with 10 hours of battery life. And Richard, I don't know, you can tell me what it's like in England, but things like Apple Maps, buying those kinds of companies, on one hand they're doing the chip acquisitions, which makes their core technologies better, but they're also buying these companies that will improve discoverability, transit, which is kind of filling holes that they have in their current offering.
Yeah, I mean, it's the user-facing stuff that ultimately the majority are going to take interest in and care more about. Stuff that happens under the hood is, I mean, I don't understand it, but it makes the overall experience better. But it's things like making maps better with transit is going to make more of a difference to more of the people. I mean, in London, for example, is the best example over here. You've got bus routes, you've got train routes, you've got tube routes, all those sort of things that aren't covered by Apple Maps at the moment. If somebody can just reach into their pocket, pull out their iPhone and go into the Maps app and literally find how to get anywhere using any method of transport, those people are going to be happy. I mean, I've got a folder full of different applications that do just that, but you have to bounce from one to the other. I've got a map for tube, and I've got a map for bus routes and things like that. Just going into Apple Maps opening it up and having it all there would be it would make it my life a lot easier. I wouldn't have to go out looking for those sort of things. And under the hood improvements, they're things for the for the smartphone nerds and to get excited about. It's how it's how it appears to us sort of simple smartphone users like myself that really makes the difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny. I was going to make a British Rail joke because that is such a patchwork of hurt that I don't even want to get into that.
Yeah.
But, it's absolutely right, and it makes sense for Apple to buy their way into this market because the problem with transit and why they couldn't do it initially is that it is an incredibly painful thing because you have so many, not only regional, train, subway, bus authorities, but municipal. There's often different authorities in charge of them. Some of them will not share their data nicely. Some of them have exclusive agreements already, and that's a lot. It's not one of Apple's core competencies. They haven't been doing this for 10 years the way Google has, and Google spent a lot of time and money to acquire their transit database and to get those deals. And if Apple can buy their way into them using those hundreds of billions of Carl Icahn marked dollars, then I think that's a way better solution for all of us who don't really care how hard it is. We just want it, now. That's my rant about that. Now I'm going to let you guys have your rant on because before the show I asked you what do you guys want to talk about, and Peter emphatically said that he was not done curb stomping in-app purchases yet. True enough, he beat it until it was not only a dead horse but an undead horse that was then a walking dead horse. You wanted to take a few more swings, Peter?
Sure, absolutely. Well, last week I went off on in-app purchases, talking about what a quagmire they've become, and how predatory some developers and publishers have become in using in-app purchases, and not, I guess, taking advantage really of customers' naivete about how this stuff works and how much money they're actually spending. But I'm going to let Richard pick it up because Richard went off this morning on a big publisher who just made a major release on iOS and made it suck in a big way.
Let me guess. Was it EA? Was it EA?
It might have been EA. Yeah. It frustrates me more than anything. I think it's because it's one of my favorite franchises. It's a game I've played for years on console, on mobile, anywhere. It's a premium game. I happily pay money every year to play a good Madden NFL game. They've released Madden 25, the 25th anniversary, a special kind of milestone year for them, and they have completely trashed it with in-app purchases and with some god-awful Facebook integration that just it spoils the experience. So I downloaded it with the intention of actually reviewing the game for the site, doing it properly, as we often do with bigger titles.
Proper English review.
Proper English review, but I couldn't. I've stopped, deleted it. I'll never play it again. And at the end of the post I wrote this morning, I've actually said, don't waste your time. Play one of the older ones. The two biggest problems with this particular game, as soon as you start playing, you have to pay to play. There's some kind of in-game currency. It's like Madden coins and some little lightning bolt things, but you have to contribute some of your allowance to play a game. So that immediately says to me that something is going to have to be handed over at some point to play. So that's the first wall. But the second one is when it asks you to, if you want to log into your Facebook account, to link your Facebook account, spam your friends, get some free coins. Now, I don't have an active Facebook account, but because this is a freemium game, I reactivated it just to get 2,500 of these coins to play the game with. And try disconnecting your Facebook account from the game and trying to play it. It's not just told me to start from scratch. It's told me I cannot play it on my iPad anymore. And that is, it doesn't matter which way you look at it, that is appalling. Absolutely appalling. I've deleted it, I've re-downloaded it, reinstalled it, and it does not budge. It does not budge at all. It tells you that if you've played Madden 25 on this device with a Facebook account, you can't play it ever again without having a Facebook account, and that just sucks.
You know, it's really interesting because another EA game really screwed up the way that IAP is handled as well, and I'm talking about Real Racing 3 from FireMonkey. You know, Real Racing franchise, the first two games you paid up front. You paid a premium price because this was a real serious console-style racing game for iOS devices, and you were getting a big bang for your buck. But they decided to go freemium with Real Racing 3, and they really kind of brought it down. Meantime, Plants vs. Zombies 2, you know, a lot of people were waiting for, and when we heard it was freemium, I think our hearts dropped. But the freemium model in Plants vs. Zombies 2 isn't overly oppressive. You know, it's not something that really destroyed the game. But Madden 25, from everything that you said, Richard, it just sounds like it's a vicious money grab.
And what hurts me more is that last week during their EA's Gamescom press conference, they was obviously talking about future games, and FIFA came up because obviously that's for PS4 and for Xbox One. FIFA 14 is one of the big launch titles, and they got onto FIFA Mobile, which they just came out, you know, flat out said this is going to be a free-to-play game. And I've been playing FIFA on consoles since 1995, and if their mobile game follows Madden 25, never again. I'm happy enough to keep giving them money to play the console games while ever I can give them £40 and just have a quality console game. But I'm done with this. I can't. I will not play these games anymore.
Tiny Vader fist.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Real Racing 3 I've already started and I'm kind of through it, and it's bad. It's a much worse implementation than just paying a premium price like for the previous versions, but you don't have to. There is at least some kind of structure to it. So as you play
like
through
Plants
the game,
vs. Zombies too, right? Like that. It's bad but not terrible.
Yeah,
it's not play to win.
Yeah.
It's not
but
eventually, unless you're a really skilled racer, which I assume that you are, Richard, given your avocation, you do eventually have to start forking over money if you want to really get further in the game. But let me bring this back on topic, because there's actually a really interesting discussion going on in our chat room right now about this as well, and I want to address some of the issues that are popping up. Some people are saying, well, listen, you know, in-app purchases, it's all about self-control. I don't buy in-app purchases, the problem is finished. Look,
it's Diamond denies, right? He's saying we're adults, we take responsibility.
We're adults, we take responsibility. I understand what Diamond is saying, but here are the plain and simple facts of the matter. When it comes, and let's look at this from the developer's standpoint for a moment. When the App Store first launched, games were priced at a reasonable amount, and developers actually made a lot of money initially, but
$10 for Super Monkey Ball, and they made $1 million relatively quickly.
And they made $1 million relatively quickly. Some people got rich, and some companies that some larger companies that were involved in it lined their pockets pretty well as well. But the race to the bottom started very quickly. Developers realized that they could move more units by charging less money, and the race to $1 for a game started. Once Apple implemented the in-app purchase model, things changed dramatically.
And the charts, I'd argue too, the charts made a bigger problem in this.
The charts did make a big problem, absolutely. The way that the games were rated and the way that they're weighted in those charts created a lot of problems for developers. But anyway, back to the issue. In-app purchases changed everything for developers, because now they're able to release something for free, and they're able to charge people on the back end of it in order to finish the game, and customers have responded very, very well to this. I have talked to any number of iOS developers over the years, and there are plenty of cases where they may have released a game at a fixed price and sold X units, and then release it as freemium, re-release it as freemium, and sell, an exponentially greater number of units than they did with the product priced at what they thought was a reasonable amount. The fact of the matter is, people want something for free and are willing to pay on the back end of it. But the problem is when developers start taking advantage. So something really interesting happened literally within minutes of Richard's rant about Madden 25. This morning, a company in the UK, a software developer that's been around for many years, was really at the start of the App Store when it first launched, called Strange Flavor. Their website is Strange Flavor with a U because
that's how it's spelled in England.
And in Canada too. The Queen is not yours alone. We lost Peter. He'll be back in a second. But what he was talking about is the idea that a lot of people have mentioned, which is that there should be a limit to in-app purchase, or there should be an option, sort of like what the Buy Now button is in eBay, where yes, you can participate in the auction, but there's an upper limit to how much you can. There's also the option to just pay a certain amount of money and get what you need to get immediately. And that's the thing that's missing from in-app purchase games is yes, you can spend $1, $5, $10. There's a $99 credit card in Real Racing 3. For Lords of Cobal's sake, but there should be a point where you've spent whatever it is, $10, $20, $50 in the game, and it just says, all right, you're a big spender, we're unlocking everything, we're never going to nickel and dime you for another in-app purchase again, you've got carte blanche in the game. So you can get it for free, you can buy your way up with in-app purchase, or you can just pay for it up front or reach a limit in in-app purchase and unlock everything. And I think, Richard, maybe it's impossible to go back to the world of premium price gaming, but maybe that's enough of a middle ground.
Yeah, if that, I mean, I applaud the guys for what they're doing. It's a fantastic tactic. I don't object to the idea of a free game. I mean, I blame Candy Crush for making hundreds of thousands of dollars a day for continuing this precedent. But going back to Madden 25, underneath all the crap, there is a really good game, but I won't play it because of all the stuff on top of it. If EA had a button in there, like the Strange Flavor guys are implementing to some of their stuff, that said, okay, $15, $20. Boom, unlock everything, play it as much as you want. I would probably go in, play one game to make sure it didn't suck, and press that button. I would be more than happy, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people who would as well. And it's kind of, I had a little sort of brief chat in the comments on the post earlier, and I've just started looking at a Windows Phone properly, just to kind of learn a bit more about it, and I don't know how widespread it is, but in their marketplace you can trial paid apps, and obviously that's something that Microsoft has implemented into their store. But I would begrudge freemium less if we had an option that either we could try out for free and go back to paying $10, $15 for a really good game, but have it for 2 days to make sure that we enjoyed it first, or go to this, get the game for free, play it, either pay us every time you need to do something, or hit this button and unlock the lot, because it just frustrates me. I enjoy playing games on my iPad, and things like this are just ruining the experience for me.
No, absolutely, and I think it is important to distinguish, though, because there are probably good-natured, well-intended developers who just, I mean, to go back to the chat room point again, we absolutely caused this. We said that we're not going to pay $10 for a game. We're not going to pay $1 for a game. We'll pay because we're bored or because we have an ego. We want to be the best, or we want not to waste our time. That's all we'll pay for. So they're feeding our real needs, and they're making the best money they can. But some companies are like casinos, and all they want to do is optimize in-app purchase to take as much money as possible from us. They actually employ psychologists to do that. George and I did a whole iMore show, about the psychology of freemium and how it's designed to take our money away from us. And that kind of thing probably won't go away. But I think you'd quickly see the separation between people who are trying to make a great game and generate enough money to keep making games, because it is not cheap to make a good quality. It is not cheap to make a Real Racing or a Madden game by any means. I think we could probably get, with maybe trials and with maybe caps, we could at least figure out who are the good guys and who are the complete jerks, and then spend our money accordingly.
The whole trial concept.
We've been doing some stuff on the site. I started doing the history of the iPhone. So I started off, I've got 2 up already. I've got the history of the first iPhone. I don't know what it was like in England, because I believe at least one carrier in the UK had it, but no one in Canada had the original iPhone. So I had to smuggle one in from AT&T. I had to get a Rogers SIM. It was $200 for 100 megabytes of data back then. I had to wait for it to be jailbroken before I could use it as a phone. But it was still such a good experience, even though it couldn't MMS like my Trio. It couldn't. There were no third-party apps. There was no cut and paste. Multi-touch and the interface were so good that I was happy to put up with that. Did you get the first iPhone? I don't remember if you said so or not.
The actual first iPhone that I got was the 3GS, and that was purely. It actually ties in quite well with what the guys have been talking about on Talk Mobile today. The first two iPhones in the UK were exclusive to O2, so you had a similar choice to the Americans. You either go to O2 and get the iPhone, or you get something else. And I wasn't prepared to go to O2 because they just weren't a good carrier. They didn't give me good reception where I lived. So
like AT&T, you couldn't use your phone like a phone.
Yeah, that was ultimately the initial deciding factor, and it was horribly expensive. I mean, we've been getting free phones on contract for years, and I could get Windows Mobile smartphones and stuff on free on contract, and the iPhone
I don't
came
think
in.
People remember, right? But it was the off-contract. The on-contract price is what would now be considered the off-contract price.
Absolutely. I mean, a good friend of mine, he went out and queued up to get the first iPhone, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but he said it was something like £250
it's
plus
like $500
a contract.
US, yeah, plus a contract.
Plus that 2-year contract. And when you look at how much data and minutes and stuff you got back then as well, it was pretty poor. So I mean, I kind of suffered a little bit the same as a lot of people around the world. It was exclusive to one carrier for the first 2 generations, and then after the launch of it wasn't even at launch. It was sometime after the launch of the 3GS that the carrier exclusivity broke and everybody else could join in.
And what's interesting to me too is when you go back. I mean, Apple had to drop the price. They dropped it by a couple $100. They got rid of the 4 gigabyte model. They introduced a 16 gigabyte model. They did a famous thing where they gave you $100 Apple credit to early adopters. But what was interesting to me too is at the time the competitors, the entrenched incumbents in the smartphone space, and I mean RIM, who's now BlackBerry, Microsoft, who then had Windows Mobile, Nokia, who was doing Symbian back then, and Palm, who was still doing Palm OS, never mind WebOS, never mind HP, never mind not existing. They derided Apple, and part of that, I mean, if you're a rival CEO, it's your job to trash talk, new upstart companies or your competition in general. But what they said made it absolutely crystal clear that they had no idea the game had just changed. Ed Colligan famously said, we've been working for years on making a good phone, and these PC guys aren't just going to walk in when people didn't want phones. They wanted PCs they could put in their pockets, and it took a PC company to do that. Steve Ballmer said that Apple's going to get no significant market share, and he had a valid point based on their initial price, but it was fairly easy to foresee a place where the price would come down. And BlackBerry, I mean, they totally believed that users didn't care about experience or games or graphics or web browsing. They believed that the future was data compression, that we would care so much about data compression we wouldn't care at all about anything else. And they wasted years. I mean, it's not that they saw the original iPhone come out and then the 3G and they changed it. They believed that. They released the BlackBerry Storm and Torch. They released Windows Mobile 6 and 6.5. They released Symbian whatever editions. They released, Palm, to their credit, at least went to WebOS much faster than everybody else. But none of them took the iPhone seriously when it launched.
No, and the experience, like you say, was so different to anything else that was on the market. I mean, I remember seeing the very first iPhone, and it was completely out of this world. It was, just the capacitive touchscreen. That was the thing that stood out for me the most. We're going from these little resistive screens with pens and dragging things across, and you could tell even in the early days that it was a whole new experience. But it was, like, from my perspective, and over here, it was so expensive and it was so exclusive that kind of stunted its growth in the early days. Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. It took till when the iPhone 3G came out, and I've got the history of the iPhone 3G. posted immediately. Steve Jobs listed several things, including 3G and GPS, enterprise support, as being needed, and two of them were more countries, and they got it into 70 countries by the end of the year, and the other one was more affordable, and it had proven so attractive, it was proven so good at selling value-added services like visual voicemail and like data plans, that the carriers not only subsidized it, but prepaid Apple for it. It became hugely lucrative for Apple, and they got the iPhone 3G down to $200 on contract, and that's when the smartphone started going mainstream. An interesting thing there is it wasn't any of Apple's competitors who figured that out first. It was their partner at the time, Google, who originally started dicking around with Android. I mean, they bought it from Andy Rubin's company. He'd done Sidekick previously. He'd worked at Apple previously. And he was making a Windows mobile standard Nokia communicator, BlackBerry, type device, because Google's big fear was that Microsoft would control the mobile web and cut them out of search, and mobile was absolutely the future. But then the iPhone came out, and Google spun on a dime, and they realized that Apple was going to be the one to take control of the internet. And whether they should have feared Apple or not, and that's an arguable point, they immediately made Android more like an iPhone, with more like an iPhone experience, and they managed to get the T-Mobile G1, which was the dream in Canada and Europe, out on the market, months after the iPhone 3G launched. And WebOS wasn't too far behind, but didn't have Google's power or money, and they were the only ones who actually started giving Apple a run for the money. And then we went from a world where Apple was the upstart compared to Nokia and BlackBerry to a world where Nokia and BlackBerry faded. Apple grew, but Android blew past them.
Yeah, so absolutely, and yeah, you're absolutely right, and just you think back to how things have progressed and progressed since since the launch of the iPhone. It was Google ultimately did react quickest, but for some time afterwards, I was using a Windows mobile device for some time, and then BlackBerries, and where we are now, you've got things like Windows Phone 8 and BlackBerry 10, and they're kind of catching up with that sort of experience. But it does, you having sort of using them all, it almost feels like they're having to play catch up rather than running alongside. And arguably, if you put Android and iOS next to each other, regardless of any differences or hatreds or whatever, the two platforms are both arguably as solid as each other, but in different areas.
Yeah.
And the inherent weaknesses of BlackBerry 10 and of Windows Phone, there's nothing as sort of strong that's missing from Android and from iOS, and that's just purely down to, I think, that obviously Apple kicked it all off, but Google was the quickest to react.
Yeah, I mean, if you take, like I've said over and over again, if Microsoft, if Steve Ballmer, who has just retired, and we can talk about that for a minute if we want to, actually, let's talk about it now. Steve Ballmer, it sounds like he was shown the door, but the official statement was that he decided very quickly to retire. If he had gotten because the Xbox was an accident. Ballmer was very good at maximizing revenues from Windows and Office-based products. He made a fortune for Microsoft, but he was absolutely terrible at introducing new products and future revenue streams, which is something that Apple excels on. Apple is never afraid of killing their current darling to create the next darling. Microsoft terrified of losing Windows and Office revenue. But if 4 years ago, 3 years ago even, if Steve Ballmer recognized the value of the Xbox brand, which was a miracle that they got it. I mean, Jay Allard kept that totally separate. Microsoft ended up firing him. I'm surprised we actually got an Xbox, but we did. If they took the Xbox brand, made an X phone and an X Slate, had those on the market 3 years ago with Halo built in, Office built in, and absolutely nailed for mobile, along with Exchange support and all the great enterprise technologies, SharePoint, everything that Microsoft does so well, CRM, whatever, that would have been a compelling device. But instead, under his watch, they responded. They had MSN before there was Google, but Bing is behind. They had tablet PC before there was an iPad, but Surface is behind. they missed all the new opportunities. And I don't know if that's a Microsoft thing or a Bomber thing, but it'll be interesting to see if they're so far behind they can't catch up, or if they can pull one of those second coming of Steve Jobses and actually make Microsoft relevant again to technology.
It is quite a strange situation in that you can consider that in at least some areas Microsoft perhaps are falling behind the competition. I mean, for so many years, Microsoft were personal computing, desktop, laptops, even to an extent in mobile. Microsoft were everywhere. I think you hit the nail on the head with the Xbox thing. I remember when I've been a PlayStation gamer since the very first one came out, and the Xbox was just this. It was this big, massive piece of equipment, but it came literally from nowhere for me. I didn't actually believe that Microsoft had made a games console. When I first heard about it, I thought it was a joke. But it's been an absolute raging success for them, and you can kind of see that they're starting to pull, maybe too late, but they're starting to pull the Xbox branding around. You've now got Xbox Music, Xbox Video, and obviously, as we've seen with the Xbox One, they're kind of integrating a lot more into the Xbox One and trying to bring everything together. But they kind of, it seems to me that they've got all these little pieces of the puzzle, but nobody's putting them all together. Apple, on the other hand, as you said, they're not afraid to kill something to go down a different path, but everything's kind of knitted together. So we've got OS X. It more and more becomes melded with iOS, with iCloud integration and apps being shared across, and now we've got maps and iBooks coming across, and it's nothing kind of, I don't know, revolutionary, if you want to, for want of a word, but it's just there. It's just a thing. It's just an ecosystem, and it just all pulls together. Microsoft have kind of got all these little bits and pieces that arguably should produce a much bigger, better, stronger ecosystem, and they have the potential to be in every room in your house and in your pocket and everywhere. But there's just something that's not quite pulling it together yet, and maybe that can be Ballmer's replacement.
Scott Forstall, CEO of Microsoft.
Yeah, there's I can't remember where I saw it. Somebody linked to I think it's a UK bookmakers has got Johnny Ive at 40-1 to be new Microsoft CEO.
I said this on MacBreak Weekly, but I think it bears repeating, is that it exemplifies the difference between Apple and Microsoft in a fairly terrible way. And that is, they both have the stated goal. Like, Apple's relentless pursuit has been to mainstream, Apple and Steve Jobs specifically, their relentless pursuit is to mainstream computing. They made, the Apple II was a more accessible computer than any command line before. The Macintosh used GUI to make computers even more accessible. The whole purpose of the iPad, the computer, the device that Steve Jobs said was most important in his life, was to make computer technology even more accessible, and indeed, more people can use an iPad than can use a Mac or a Windows PC, and they just do that over and over and over again. And Microsoft's mantra was, a PC on every desk, in every office, in every home, and they wanted to make the computer ubiquitous, but they lost sight of that. And it boils down to this: Apple never mistook their product for their business, where Microsoft absolutely mistook their product for their business. Mac was never Apple's business; it was a product, and it did what it had to do, and then iPod did the same thing, and then iPhone did the same thing. And whenever one product declined, they had another product that exemplified their business, ready and waiting to go. Where Microsoft ended up believing that they were a Windows and server and Office company, not a mainstreaming technology company, and they held on to those products until they crashed enterprise-like into San Francisco. And I don't know how you can recover. I don't know who can be the new CEO. I don't know who can turn that battleship around. No, I mean,
somebody's going to give it a good shot, but everybody needs Microsoft to get their act together and to succeed and to start killing it again, because we always say it, and it might be a little bit cliched, but competition is what makes these things get better. Without competition in the desktop for the Mac and for OS X, what kind of impetus is there to push it along? So many people rely on Microsoft products for it to go away, but it's just kind of messy at the moment.
They'll become like IBM, where they're still hugely valuable but irrelevant to our everyday lives.
Yeah, and that's not how it. I'm not a particular. I wouldn't say I'm like a Microsoft fan or anything like that, but I don't want to see them go that way. We need them. Everybody needs them, and I might not like to use some of their products, but millions and millions and millions and millions of people around the world do, and we need them to make them better and to keep driving everybody else forward.
I don't think the question is whether
Peter,
or not...
I apologize. He was having power issues, and now his network is acting up, so he dropped off, and we haven't been able to get him back. So I'm going to put you on the hot seat, Richard, and I'm going to ask you, what great games or apps have you been using this week?
Well, I've been playing a couple actually. The one that keeps me going at the moment is Asphalt 8. I mentioned it briefly last week, but it's kind of freemium-ish. You pay a small amount and you've got in-app purchases, but it's a great, really, really great sort of casual arcadey style racing game, and that's really, really good. I've all the time in the world for that. And actually, the other thing I've been playing most this week is not a new game, but I've been revisiting NBA Jam. I love
the one from the arcades.
Yeah, it's a more modern twist. It's been updated a little bit, but I was thinking back to the good old days playing on on the Mega Drive, and I just picked it up, and that was it. Once I picked it up, an hour later, and I'm still playing it. So it's funny what you can get back into just by picking up and having a short play.
I've been using, and Richard, you picked up the story before I even woke up, Marvel's Unlimited app, which is their subscription service, which lets you basically get all you can eat. It's like Netflix, but for comic books. It's been updated so you can store even more comic books locally. I'm going to be flying out to San Francisco in a couple weeks, and I read a lot of comics on the airplane because I find books just too intense. Comics are lighter, and I can enjoy them more while I'm flying, and be able to download a bunch of issues. I just recently saw a bunch of Arthur Adams, I think they were the Hulk issues that I'd never seen before. It was Ultimates. It was some cockamamie Jeff Loeb story where Wolverine's son was reforming the X-Men or whatever. But Arthur Adams' art is so good, I'll even read crappy Jeff Loeb comics to get to see it. And you couldn't store very many offline, but now you can store a ton of them. And if you're a comic books fan, and especially the Thor movies coming out, if you want to reread Walter Simonson's epic Ragnarok and Roll arc in the Thor comics that a lot of it will be based on, or when Captain America Winter Soldier comes out and you want to catch up on Ed Brubaker's fantastic Winter Soldier series from Captain America, or Avengers 2 Age of Ultron, if you want to read back and see everything about Iron Man and Ultron before the movie comes out, Marvel Unlimited is absolutely the best way to do it, and I cannot recommend it highly enough.
I agree. I don't read nearly as many comic books as I know you do, but I do subscribe to the service, and I did think that 6 was a little slim for storing offline, particularly if you're on a plane. So doubling that is it's well worth taking a look at.
So the last thing I'm going to do before we sign off today is just to let you know our other podcast this week. I think we're going to have one up every day this week. It's insane. There was a new episode of Vector went up with Clayton Morris from Fox News, where we talk a little bit about the popularization of technology with products like the iPad, but also about how mainstream media, some of the stuff we talked about earlier, has failed to really bring their content to the digital marketplace. We talk about TiVo and Xbox One and a bunch of the other players like that. So check that out. Very interesting conversation. On Tuesday, we had DJ2, Algorithm from Germany, talking about their fantastic music DJ app for the iPad and iPhone on Iterate. They talked all about how they decided to bring that technology to iOS. We're going to have last week we had Will Shipley talked about Next in the early days of Apple on Debug. Next week we have, I'm not going to spoil it, but we have a guy who was product manager for OS X for many years on the show. and he talks about his experience at Apple trying to kick OS 10 out the door every year, or every 2 years, I think, back then. And it is amazing. Some of my favorite debug episodes are when we talk to former Apple managers and directors, and they share what it's actually like inside the company. So if you haven't already, you can find all of these imore.com/vector, imore.com/iterate, imore.com/debug. And tomorrow we have a Zen in Tech with Georgia, where we talk about making your workplace more Zen, so you can actually enjoy the time you spend behind the computer and behind the tablet more. And the last thing, and I promise I will shut up immediately after this, is we have our contest still going on, Countdown to iPhone 5S. We've been talking about it. We want to give you a chance to win it. And by win it, I mean every week for the last 3 weeks and continuing on until next week, we are giving away $500 gift certificates for you to put towards a brand new Apple iPhone of your choice. And depending on the price of the phone and your contract situation, you could get it absolutely free. All you have to do, it depends on the day. We have different ways of entering. We pick one winner a week. You can follow us on Twitter. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can circle us on Google+. You can like us on Facebook. Today's chance is, if you find this video, this very show on YouTube, you subscribe to our YouTube channel and you leave a comment, a YouTube comment for this show, you'll be entered for a chance to win that $500. And believe me, we want to give away as many of these as possible. We want to get as many iPhones out there as possible, because you'll come to us looking for awesome stuff you can do with your iPhone. So it's win-win-win. That's it, Richard. I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not allowed to enter the competition, so
nope.
somebody better had to. It's I can't. I've thought about signing up for a couple of shady accounts, but no.
Don't you do it, Divine? Don't you do it?
Do it.
Yeah, you do it, not
awesome
Richard.
prize.
Everyone but Richard.
Yeah, everyone but me. Yeah, it's awesome prize.
So, again, Peter dropped off, but you can find him at Flarg, Flargh, on Twitter. You can find him on iMore, and you can find him at loopinsight.com, The Loop. Richard, where can we find you?
I am found every day on iMore.com, obviously. Should probably give a cheeky little plug as well to one of our buddies' podcasts. I will be found on the Android Central show tomorrow evening, talking all things EFA. It's a big show we've got happening next week. Otherwise, the best place to find me is usually Google+, where you search for my name, or Twitter at Ricka666.
And you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find me, of course, on iMore.com. You can find all of our shows, including Vector and Iterate and Debug, and the Android Central podcast, Crackberry podcast, Windows Phone podcast, everything worth listening to or watching in this universe at mobilenations.com. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, chat room. You guys have been erudite and enthralling. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.